Now, as a lot of you know, Nintendo recently showed off some things that we are going to see in the new Super Mario 3D World port. And by the looks of it, people are quite excited for this game and the extra content that's seen in it. The trailer has more than 6.7 million views in a week! And now that all of you are so excited for this game, it's time to take a look at my favorite enemies seen in Super Mario 3D World. But we won't cover any enemies that weren't new. I only want to talk about unique enemies that were seen for the first time in this game. So, let's jump in right away. Number 5. Now, to start off this wonderful list, we will look at an enemy that is a bit odd. And that's mostly because he doesn't actually attack you. In the end, they do very little in general, actually. In the game, they only have one quite simple role, being a hazard of sorts. I'm talking about the Taifu, who appear in only 2 levels. Taifu Flurries, and Gigantic Seasick Wreck. And in these missions, you encounter them alongside certain pathways, just sitting there doing nothing. But then, all of a sudden, they can release an enormous gust of wind, which can push projectiles such as fireballs from a fire flower, obstacles such as a spike, and even players. The only ones who are safe from them are heavy enemies such as bullies, who are unaffected by their wind. Now, in general, they are unbeatable. All you can really do is stun them with fireballs or boomerangs. Sure, there are ways of beating them, but you will probably die in the process. Now, clearly, you can notice that this isn't really an enemy. Sure, it's labeled as such, but it doesn't behave like one. It's more a sentient obstacle. In a way, they are very similar to stuff like the grinders, cannons, or burners. And an enemy like this isn't seen a whole lot in 3D games, because of the fact that they would be pretty easy to avoid. However, here they actually pulled it off, and so they spiced up the levels a bit. And I like them because of that. They either force the player to slow down because you can't be too reckless around these, or you need to time your moves. Especially when there are a bunch of them in a row. And combined with other enemies like the Walleye, which is also seen in Taifu Flurries, it works great. And I gotta say, in Super Mario Odyssey they also had quite a fun role. So hey, Nintendo even did something cool with them after this title. Number 4. Now, in the Super Mario games, the enemies have one simple role, to be honest. Stopping Mario from advancing so that he can never beat Bowser and save Princess Peach. And usually they do this by just dealing damage or throwing you off a cliff or something. But there's also another way of achieving this goal. Just stopping Mario from going past them. That way he will never win either. And the Walleye that I mentioned a second ago does exactly that. Now, they are a rare enemy only appearing in Taifu Flurries, the Great Gold Pole, and the Mystery House Marathon. And their tactics are incredibly simple. They move from side to side in an attempt to keep Mario where he is. This enemy won't allow you to walk past them, and they can do this quite successfully because they are basically a huge wall. And that's not all, because coming into contact with them can hurt because they have spikes around their body, with their front and back being safe to touch. But they can be temporarily dazed by a projectile or a claw attack, and can even be destroyed by Lucky Cat Mario. Now, clearly enemies like the Thwomp inspired Nintendo to make this odd enemy. However, it's still very different from an enemy like that. It doesn't try to crush you and is a whole lot smaller. That way it can block your path effectively. And then some players will even try to jump past him, but end up getting hit by the spikes. In general, this enemy is weird and unlike anything else seen in the Super Mario franchise. And because of that, I quite like them. And surprisingly enough, they do their job well. And I think there were a lot of people who never thought that that would be the case. Number 3. Now, for our next enemy, we will look at one that's adorable in my opinion. But I will admit, their role in the game isn't too special. Now, I'm of course talking about the Block Steppers, and the idea behind them is quite simple, to be honest. These guys are basically red blocks with feet, cornet-like mouths, wear brown soldier hats, and have a wind-up key in their back. Their name is a combination of block, which they resemble, and lockstep, referring to their synchronized marching formation. Now, they are seen in various levels, always marching in groups of 2 or more. And defeating them is actually surprisingly easy. They can be killed with any attack, and when you deal with one in the group, they will all scatter, running around frantically in a panic. But after a few seconds, they will act in unison listen and aggressively chase you. Clearly they aren't that big of a threat. They panic as soon as they are in a combat situation after all. To be honest, this enemy is a bit of a joke. They are just as dangerous as Goombas after all, and even their look is just a reference. They clearly look like Nutcracker dolls, which are decorative Nutcracker figurines most commonly made to resemble a toy soldier. In German tradition, the dolls are symbols of good luck, frightening away malevolent spirits, and are also part of German folklore, serving as protectors of a house. And personally, I quite like them because of the fact that they took inspiration from this age-old idea. Most of us have seen these dolls after all. So sure, in terms of combat they are quite boring, but their design is cool and they're quite fun to look at in my opinion. Number 2. Now, while our previous enemy wasn't too thrilling, this next one is a lot more interesting because its role in the game is quite odd. In a way, it's an obstacle. I'm talking about the Piranha Creepers, who usually appear in jungle-themed levels, such as Piranha Creeper Creek and Deep Jungle Drift. They often live in holes in walls, both on the ground and underwater, and some even live in poison. And, like the normal piranha plants, they can also be found in warp pipes. Now, their tactic of slowing down Mario is actually quite simple. They snake along the ground and even in the air in various patterns. And some of them can even be found sleeping, unless they are attacked, after which they pause before moving back to their previous position and resume their rest. Now, to defeat one of these, you need to attack its head, and if you do, they will back up and eventually smack against their living spot, which actually kills them. And if you end up hitting their stem, then you will take damage, because it's covered in spikes. Now, clearly these guys are more of an obstacle than an actual enemy. They are just in your way and do little to nothing. But just like the Walleye, they are incredibly good at stopping you and annoying the player. However, it's easier to get rid of these. However, it's still great at limiting movement and slowing the player down in their adventure of defeating Bowser. And personally, I really like the fact that they started to add more and more enemies like this, because they fulfill the role of an obstacle while being more active. You can interact with them and even get rid of them in ways, which isn't possible with something like a grinder or a burner. So this truly is a step up in my opinion. Number 1. Now we get to our best pick, an enemy that I actually talked about quite recently, and now I will do it once again, because the idea behind it is just genius. I'm of course talking about the Hopchomps, who are quite special enemies in my opinion, because they are some sort of mini-game in a way. Now they appear in Big Bounce Byway, Searchlight Sneak, and Mystery House Marathon. And when you approach one of these, it will begin to bounce toward you and bite at you with its huge teeth. And they can be defeated by any attack. However, all of this doesn't make them too special, to be honest. Now, what actually makes them so unique is that you encounter them in groups a lot, and when defeated, they sometimes turn into a springboard, which you can carry around and use. And after a while, it will turn back into a Hopchomp, and this can basically happen at any time, even when you're carrying it. So in a way, this enemy is a bit of a mini-game. You encounter a group of them, and then it's up to you to figure out which one will change into a springboard. And then when you succeed, you gotta figure out where to use it, and do all of it fast enough, or it will turn back into an enemy, hurting you. This whole idea is incredibly cool, and certainly improved the springboards seen in the Super Mario series, who, for years, were quite useful items to find extra pathways or secrets in Super Mario Worlds. But they were also very limited. They had a simple role that added something to the game, but clearly you can do a whole lot more with it. And now this thing is also an enemy, instead of just an item with limited uses. So it evolved in a way, which I also mentioned in a recent video where I covered the evolution of the trampoline seen in Super Mario. So if you want more info on this enemy and how it changed everything, then be sure to check out that video. It will be in the upper right corner. And now that you all know which Super Mario 3D World enemies are my favorites, we have reached the end of this video. Now, I'm certainly very excited for the new port and the extra expansion, Bowser's Fury. And within a couple of weeks, we will finally be able to play it. But for now, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell button, like the video, and check out that one video that I just mentioned. It's pretty good. And don't worry, more Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury content is coming soon.